She was scrubbing the wheels of a black Mercedes in the staff lot, hair damp with sweat, her voice barely louder than the hum of passing cars. But the melody she hummed raw, familiar. Heartbreakingly off-key froze the man in the tailored suit just a few feet away. He hadn't heard that song since the night his daughter vanished. Why would a teenage car cleaner know it? And why did her voice shake like that? If this story touches something deep in you, stay with us. And if you feel it's worth sharing, liking, or leaving a thought thank you, it matters more than you know. The wind was sharp that afternoon, brushing past the rows of gas pumps at Venbrook Auto Plaza, like it had somewhere more important to be. Mason Whitmore pulled his Tesla into the farthest bay, the one closest to the car wash. He hadn't planned to stop here, but something about the quiet off-ramp, the lack of cameras, the dullness of routine, made it the perfect kind of place for a man who didn't want to be seen. He'd barely put the car in park when he noticed her, a thin girl, maybe 9 or 10, wiping at his windshield with an old rag. Her coat hung off her frame, 2 sizes too big, one sleeve rolled and the other dragging. Mason lowered the window. "Hey, that's not your job. Don't touch the car." The girl didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled wry, as if she'd heard worse from better-dressed men and kept cleaning. Then, quietly, she began to hum, and then she sang. It wasn't a song anyone on the radio would know. It wasn't flashy or bright. It was soft, lilting, off-key in places. But the moment it hit Mason's ears, something inside him jerked like an old engine trying to start. That melody. Alara's melody. She used to sing it with Julia in the kitchen, hands still wet from soap, her feet barely reaching the floor. She sang it on stormy nights, curled into Mason's chest, whispering the words into his shirt like a secret. Mason hadn't heard that song since the accident, since the night his wife died, since the day they told him Alara had too. He stepped out of the car, one hand on the door, the other stiff by his side. "Where did you learn that?" The girl paused, rag now limp in her hand. "It's just something I sing when I get scared." "What's your name, Lily Bennett?" The breath caught in his throat. Bennett. He couldn't stop the name from leaving his lips. Julia Bennett. She blinked, then shrugged. "That was my mom's name, I think." Mason didn't answer. His knees folded before his thoughts did. He sat in the driver's seat, eyes fixed on her. The girl turned, unzipping the small backpack slung over her shoulder, and pulled out a piece of folded paper. "I drew this when I was little," she said. "I think it's supposed to be my family." She handed it to him without fear. Mason opened the wrinkled page. 3 stick figures, a woman with long hair, a child with a big smile, and a man with gray hair and dark eyes. Over each, a name written in pencil. Mom, me, Dad. He couldn't speak. The handwriting, though childish, was familiar. Alara used to write just like that, wide letters with uneven lines, as if each word was still learning how to stand. "Where are you staying?" he asked finally. "Here and there," Lily said, hugging her arms around herself. "They let me clean sometimes. I get snacks when I don't bother anyone. Do you remember your mother?" "Not really, just the smell of her scarf and the song." Mason nodded slowly. There was a silence between them, heavy but not hostile. He looked at her shoes, worn sneakers, mismatched laces. One was nearly falling apart. She didn't look away, didn't act scared or sad. She just stood there, waiting for something he wasn't sure he could offer. His fingers folded around the drawing again, careful not to tear it. From inside the cashier's booth, a man watched them. Mason didn't notice. He was still staring at the drawing when the girl stepped back, gave him a small, polite nod, and walked toward the storage shed behind the auto wash. She didn't look back, but he knew something had changed. The penthouse sat high above East 4th Street, far enough from the city to dull its noise, but not its weight. Mason Whitmore leaned against the kitchen island, the screen of his laptop casting a pale glow against the marble. One search bar, one name, Julia Bennett. He hit enter. Dozens of results flooded the screen: LinkedIn profiles, nursing registries, Facebook pages, all noise. But one result led him to an archived student directory from Oberlin College, class of '95. There it was, Julia Whitmore, née Bennett, theater major. He blinked. She had used her maiden name only during those first years, before they married, before Alara, before the world rewrote her story in headlines and sympathy. No one knew that detail, not even his investors. And yet, this girl Lily had dropped that name like it meant nothing, like it was just another thread in a fraying coat. He spent the night rereading old emails, hunting for meaning in every memory. But the song still played louder in his head than any fact. That melody, that voice. By mid-morning, Mason found himself parked in the same spot at Vainbrook Auto Plaza. The air smelled like burnt rubber and stale coffee. He didn't step out of the car this time. He just watched. Lily was back. Same coat, same quiet posture. She handed out wipes to customers, took loose change with a thank you that felt rehearsed. At one point, a heavy-set woman with a walker spilled a gallon of milk, trying to load it into her trunk. Lily ran over without a word, mopped the spill with rags from her bag, and picked up the bottle with 2 hands. The woman didn't say thank you. Lily smiled anyway. Mason gripped the steering wheel. When the lot cleared out, he got out, walked toward the bench by the vending machine, sat. Lily noticed him, walked over, but didn't sit. "Want your windshield done again?" she asked. Voice dry. He shook his head. "You always sing while you work." She shrugged. "Not always. Only when it's cold, or I feel like I'm not really here." He watched her. "That song. Where'd you learn it?" "Don't know. It's just always been in my head, like something from a dream." He nodded slowly, not trusting his voice. "Do you live around here?" he asked. "I stay places. Sometimes the back shed. Sometimes the church lets me nap in the basement." He offered nothing in return. Neither did she. Later that evening, Mason sat in the parking lot across the street, hidden behind a half-closed window. The lot was mostly dark now. Lily sat alone on the curb near Pump 5, humming to herself, legs tucked under her coat. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't looking for help. The song came again, softer this time, not from her throat, but from some part of her memory that hadn't forgotten. It cracked halfway through. She kept singing. He turned off the engine, not to leave, just to listen. As she hummed, she drew circles on the concrete with her finger. Her head leaned against the metal pole beside her. She looked like Alara once had after a long night of fever, curled on the couch, waiting for a lullaby that never finished. Footsteps approached his car. A man in a stained jacket, name tag half peeled, leaned into his window. "You looking out for her?" Mason didn't respond. The man rubbed his nose. "She's been here off and on for about a month. Never causes trouble. But she said something strange to my shift guy last night." Mason glanced over. Said her mom's been gone a long time. Said she doesn't remember much, only that her dad was someone she used to dream about, but never met. Mason looked back across the street. Lily had stopped singing. She was staring at the moon, lips pressed tight, as if holding a secret she didn't know the shape of. He didn't speak, didn't move. Just watched the quiet between them shift, like something trying to rise through years of silence. The sun hovered low over the Cleveland skyline, casting long slants of light through the windshield as Mason pulled into the gas station again. This time, he didn't park in the shadows or behind the larger trucks. He pulled right up front, as if the routine of pretending to pass through had run its course. Lily was there, crouched beside an old Ford pickup, scrubbing at a bumper stained with tar. She wore the same jacket, the one with a missing button near the collar, and a knit hat pulled low over her ears. Her cheeks were flushed with the cold, and when she saw him, she paused. He didn't wave, he didn't smile, but he stepped out of the car with a clean cloth in hand and offered it silently. She stood, blinking once, then accepted it without a word. "I still think you don't like dirty windshields," she said after a beat, grinning. "I don't like pretending they're clean when they're not," he replied. They moved together along the driver's side, one wiping, the other watching. It wasn't conversation. Not really. Just something quieter, older than words. When she leaned over to reach the far edge of the window, a small necklace slipped from inside her coat. It swung forward, catching the light. Mason's eyes locked on it. He reached out without thinking, catching the pendant before it disappeared back into her coat. "Sorry," Lily said, taking it gently. "It falls out sometimes. Can I see it?" She hesitated, then nodded. He turned it over in his fingers. There, etched into the metal, was a familiar mark, an E, carved into the arc of a 5-point star. Not ornate, just sharp and sure, like something done by a child with purpose. Mason's pulse shifted in his wrist. "My daughter," he said quietly, "used to draw this on everything. She wanted it on her passport, said it was the mark of a traveler." Lily tilted her head. "Cool. Where did you get it?" "In one of Mom's bags. The ones the shelter let me keep." Mason handed it back, slower than necessary. She tucked it away carefully this time. They sat on the curb afterward, sharing a pack of saltines Lily pulled from her coat. Cars rolled past without stopping. A couple honked. No one looked twice at them. "You like working here?" he asked finally. "I don't get paid, but I don't get chased off either. That's a good deal most days." Mason looked away, watching the last rays of sunlight melt into the haze above the freeway. "I know what it's like to disappear," she added suddenly. "When people stop asking about you." He looked at her again, but she was staring out across the road, as if the memory wasn't something she needed to explain. Back in his car, Mason sat longer than usual before starting the engine. The windows had fogged from his breath, and his hands lingered on the steering wheel. He didn't drive off immediately. He called Allison, his assistant. "Can you pull the accident file from October 6 years ago, Julia Whitmore? There's something off in the details. Get everything hospital intake, transport records, autopsy status. If there's a custody handoff, I want the name." There was a pause on the line. "Mason, are you okay? Just get it to me." He hung up and checked his rear view. Lily had gone inside the station. The pendant was still vivid in his mind. How many children would wear a symbol they'd never been told about? He didn't believe in signs. Not since the funeral. Not since the world kept turning without his permission. But tonight, the engine didn't roar to life. It hummed, as if waiting for something more than motion. The law office on Columbus Street hadn't changed. Still the same chipped brick facade, the iron letters rusting slightly above the glass Moore and Dolly, civil litigation. Mason hadn't walked through those doors in nearly 6 years, not since the day he signed the final paperwork that turned grief into a state law. But the carpet still smelled of lemon cleaner, and Ellen Moore still kept her hair pinned tight behind her head like she didn't trust it to behave on its own. She stood when he entered, her expression unreadable. "I wasn't expecting to see you again here." "Mason, I need to see the full file," he said. "You're going to have to be more specific. The crash. October 6 years ago. I want every document we touched, every paper filed." Ellen didn't ask why. She simply nodded and walked him to the back conference room, where the lights hummed faintly and the windows were tinted against the street glare. She pulled 2 boxes from the archive shelf. The cardboard was softer now, worn at the corners. Mason sat, fingers already tapping against the table. It was all there. Autopsy report for Julia Whitmore, blunt force trauma, death on impact, no suspicion of foul play. But when he flipped to the section marked dependent victims, there was only one line, child presumed deceased, no remains recovered. Mason frowned. "Where's the confirmation?" The forensics Ellen leaned forward, brows tightening. "There was none. We assumed, given the damage, that there wouldn't be anything viable to recover, and you were in no state to challenge that conclusion." "There was a car seat," he said. "Alara was buckled in. I remember. But the responders didn't find anything conclusive. It wasn't unusual under the circumstances." He kept reading, page after page of official language meant to settle emotion into logic. But nowhere was Alara's name listed under confirmed fatality. No DNA sample, no signed release of custody. Only a note at the bottom of one form. "All post-mortem affairs handled by Richard Cole." Ellen sat back slowly. He offered to take the lead after your breakdown. You trusted him. Mason stared at the paper, the lines blurred at the edges. Why would he do that, he asked, more to himself than to her. I don't know. But, Mason, if you're thinking what I think you are, you need to be careful. Digging into this now, I already started, he said, and I'm not stopping. Ellen said nothing for a long while. Then she stood, crossed the room, and returned with a sealed envelope. This was returned to our office a year after the accident. She said, "We thought it was a mistake. It was meant for you, but no return address. We assumed it was junk and filed it." Mason opened it. Inside was a faded photo, Julia holding Alara on her lap, both smiling, and in the corner, Richard, standing in the background, half turned away from the camera. There was a note written in childlike scrawl on the back. "This is my real family. I want to remember." His hands trembled slightly as he placed the photo down. Ellen's face softened. "Are you sure you want to go back into this? There are some answers that don't heal anything. There's a girl singing her mother's lullaby in a parking lot with a pendant my daughter designed, and now I know we never confirmed her death. So yes, I'm sure." He stood, gathering the photo and the file copies. Ellen followed him to the door. "Be careful with Richard," she said. He knew how to stay invisible when it suited him. Outside, the air had gone colder. Wind swept along the sidewalk, tugging at Mason's coat. He paused on the concrete steps, letting the weight of the photo in his pocket settle into place. His phone buzzed in his hand. A new message. Unknown number. "I heard you're digging again. There are things you were never meant to touch." He stared at the screen, unmoving. Across the street, a man walked past with a stroller, a dog barking in the distance. The city went on like nothing had shifted, but something had, and it was already too late to pretend otherwise. Venbrook Auto Plaza was quieter than usual. Late November had a way of thinning crowds. The air smelled like gasoline and fried donuts from the cart parked across the street. Mason parked across from the pump lanes, but didn't fill up. He took his coat, stepped out, and walked over to the metal bench near the air machine. From that angle, he could see the side lot and the storage shed Lily sometimes disappeared into. She was there, helping a man in coveralls push a busted bike toward the sidewalk. She leaned her full weight into it, sneakers scraping the concrete. The man gave her a small wave and a crumpled dollar, which she accepted with both hands, folding it like it was something sacred. When she spotted Mason, she didn't startle, just walked over with the same slow rhythm she moved through everything with. He gestured to the bench beside him. "Sit," he asked. Lily shrugged and sat, legs swinging just above the ground. "You work here officially?" he asked, voice even. "Nah, they don't pay me or anything, but sometimes they let me sleep in the supply shed if it's too cold. One guy gave me half a tuna sandwich once. That was a good day." He nodded, but didn't smile. "You okay out here? I'm not the worst off," she said simply. "I've seen worse." There was no pity in her voice, just fact. He studied her face. She was pale but not sickly, alert, cautious in a way that didn't seem scared, only trained. She had the look of someone who'd learned not to ask for more than she could carry. "What about your family?" "Don't have any," she said. "Not really. Mom left when I was little. Don't remember her face. Only thing I remember is the smell of her scarf. It had cloves or something. When I couldn't sleep, I'd hold it and hum. Same song every time. Made me feel like I wasn't falling." Mason leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "What song? You know the one." Her voice dropped lower. "Evening lullaby, or that's what I call it. No words, just the hum." He looked away, blinking. "My wife wrote that song," he said after a moment. "She sang it to our daughter." Lily glanced at him, but didn't ask the next obvious question. She just nodded like someone who already knew the world didn't hand out miracles without asking something in return. "Where were you before this place, a shelter?" "Greenfield." She paused. "It's shut down now, I think." But they were nice to me for a while. Gave me paper to draw on, and sometimes string cheese. Mason's breath caught. Greenfield shelter. Yeah, my wife volunteered there, a long time ago. Lily raised her eyebrows but didn't speak. The silence between them was almost cautious now, not fragile, but full of things neither of them quite knew how to unpack. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the old photograph Ellen had given him. Do you recognize this? Lily took the picture carefully, studied it, tilted it under the sunlight. That's your wife, she asked. That's Julia. She looks kind, like someone who says your name like she means it. He didn't know what to say to that. Lily held the photo a moment longer, then handed it back. I never knew her, but I think maybe she knew me, or someone like me. Mason exhaled through his nose, then sat back. He was trying not to move too fast, but every word she spoke chipped something loose in him, and every time she hummed, he heard Alara in the back seat of the car, singing without knowing she was being heard. Then Lily reached into her coat pocket. I've had this a long time, she said. Didn't know if I should keep it or throw it away, but now, maybe you should have it. She handed him a folded piece of paper, soft with age, creased in the middle. Mason unfolded it gently. On the page was a simple sheet of hand-drawn music, no lyrics, just notes, and a title in slanted cursive, Evening Lullaby. The handwriting wasn't Lily's. He knew it. Julia's loops were never quite even. The J in her name always curled in before it rose. And at the bottom, a small heart, not decoration, but a quiet marker she always left when she wrote something meant for Alara. He held the paper in his hands like it might fall apart. Lily didn't ask what it meant. She just stood, tugging her jacket closed. I have to go inside, she said. They let me mop the back room today. I like the quiet back there. Mason nodded, paper still in his lap. She walked slowly toward the service door, the edges of her hair catching the wind. She didn't look back. But he knew. Something had changed. The apartment had been untouched for days, maybe longer. Mason hadn't kept track. Sunlight bled in through the sheer curtains, but didn't warm the room. The air still carried the faint scent of cedar from a candle Julia used to burn in winter. He crossed the hardwood floor, not turning on any lights, and stopped at the corner bookshelf. Behind it was a locked cabinet with 2 bolts and a dial. He spun the numbers, fingers steady. The click of the latch echoed louder than it should have. Inside were a few plastic folders worn at the corners and an old shoebox wrapped in newspaper. He opened the folder first, handwritten music sheets, water-stained and annotated in blue ink. One in particular caught his eye. Evening Lullaby, Julia's signature curving just beneath the title. It matched the version Lily had given him, note for note. He turned it over and saw the same curled E inside a 5-point star, traced lightly in pencil, the same mark on Lily's pendant. Mason sat at the edge of the couch, holding the page in both hands, reading it as though it might speak. In the shoebox were other things sketches Alara had drawn, mostly of a woman and a child, always hand in hand, always smiling. One sketch stood out, a girl in a white dress, spinning in a garden. No faces, but the shape of the jaw, the angle of the shoulders, it was all too familiar. He placed the page and the drawing in a folder. On top, he added a photo of Julia from Greenfield Shelter. She was younger, hair pulled back in a bun, wearing a volunteer badge. It was creased from years of storage, but the smile on her face hadn't faded. The next morning, Mason drove back to Venbrook Auto Plaza. The day was cold, sky the color of pewter. He wore a dark coat, scarf knotted at the throat. In his hands, a simple brown paper bag and the folder, neatly sealed. Lily was sitting near the curb, legs crossed under her, humming quietly to herself. When she saw Mason, she didn't jump up, just smiled and made space beside her. He sat and placed the bag between them. Tea and a warm sandwich, he said. Nothing fancy. She opened it and sniffed. Smells like real food. He waited until she took a bite before opening the folder. She chewed slower as he unfolded the music page. Do you know what this song is called? He asked. She shook her head. I only know how it feels. It's called Evening Lullaby. Your mother wrote it. Lily froze, sandwich halfway to her mouth. She looked at him. My wife sang it to our daughter every night. Her name was Alara. She was 7 when we lost her. You think I don't know, he said softly. But I know that song didn't just appear in your head. I know the mark on your pendant matches the one on this page, and I know this drawing. He handed her the sketch Alara's drawing from years ago, the girl in the white dress. Lily stared at it. Her thumb brushed the penciled lines like she was trying to feel the paper's history. I used to dream about spinning, she whispered. There was always someone watching, but I never saw their face. I just felt safe. You don't have to believe anything yet, he said. But I do. She said nothing for a while, just looked at the paper, eyes wide but unreadable. When she finally looked up, her expression was neither hopeful nor afraid. It was something closer to wonder, or memory trying to catch its breath. Behind them, a man in a mechanic's jumpsuit approached, late 60s, gray hair slicked back, name tag that read, Bert. He nodded to Mason. Mind if I say something? Mason gestured for him to go on. I've seen that girl here almost a year, always on her own, quiet, kind, but not alone. What do you mean? Mason asked. There was a man, showed up 2 or 3 times, never stayed long, gave the manager some cash, said he was a cousin, but he never gave a name. Just asked if she was still around. Real thin. Wore glasses. Looked nervous every time. Lily looked at Bert, then back at Mason. I never saw him. Maybe you weren't meant to, Bert replied. Mason's jaw tensed. He stood, thanked the man, then looked at Lily. Do you remember anyone ever taking you from somewhere, moving you between places I don't know? Maybe. It's always been just shelters and stations. I don't remember the in-between. He nodded once, as if confirming something he already feared. The wind picked up again. Lily wrapped her arms tighter around the bag. The drawing was still in her lap, creased now by her grip. She didn't speak, just sat there, holding on. The diner sat quietly on the corner of East 55th and Euclid, its flickering neon sign spelling out Gracie's home kitchen with one letter half burnt. Mason picked the place deliberately humble, warm, quiet. The kind of spot where no one looked twice at a man in a wool coat and a girl in secondhand sneakers. He got there early and took the booth farthest from the windows. From his seat, he could see the whole room, including the front door. Lily arrived 5 minutes late, walking with a mix of curiosity and hesitation. She wore the same coat, sleeves pulled over her hands. The hostess didn't question her, just nodded toward Mason's table. Lily slid into the seat across from him, backpack still slung over one shoulder. This place smells like someone's grandma, she said, scanning the room. She owns it, Mason replied. And her grandson does the cooking now, keeps the tradition. Lily nodded. When the waitress brought menus, she barely looked. Her fingers hovered over the laminated page, then quickly tapped the cheapest item, grilled cheese with soup. You don't have to order the cheapest, Mason said gently. I'm used to calculating. She gave a small shrug. Makes the food taste better when I know I didn't ask for too much. He didn't respond, just closed his own menu and handed it back. While they waited, they talked about safe things, music, color, paper. Lily told him she used to draw every day, back at Greenfield Shelter, mostly with crayons on notebook backs. She liked drawing skies, clouds that looked like stories. What happened to the drawings, he asked. Left behind? I wasn't allowed to take them. Why not? She sipped her water. The man who moved me, he said no extras, just clothes. I don't think he liked color. What was his name? I don't remember. But he had a smell. Mason looked up. Mint, she added. Always smelled like mint. But not like gum. Like the green bottles doctors keep in cabinets. His pulse flicked once in his throat. Did he ever hurt you? He asked. She hesitated. No, not really. He made me memorize things, like what to say if people asked. My birthday, my full name, stuff like that. But it was always, like, rehearsing. I wasn't allowed to change the words. Mason's hands rested on the table, fingers intertwined. Did he ever call you by your real name? He called me Lily. He let out a slow breath. The soup arrived. Lily dipped her spoon once, then again. Her appetite flickered, cautious but present. After they finished, Mason paid in cash. Outside, the streetlights had come on, brushing the sidewalk with thin gold shadows. Lily stood next to him near the bus stop, backpack clutched in both hands. Her breath showed in puffs. He pulled an envelope from his coat and held it out. "What's that A card?" he said. "Just a note. And an invitation." She looked at it, but didn't take it right away. "I want to show you something." He continued. "My house. You don't have to come. You don't have to stay. But I think it might help. Maybe there's something there that'll feel familiar." "What if it doesn't?" she asked quietly. "Then we'll know, and you'll still get to finish your grilled cheese next time." That earned the smallest laugh. She took the card, turned it over once in her hands, then slid it into her pocket. "Okay," she said. "Not tomorrow, but maybe the day after. I'll be home." A bus rolled up behind them. She stepped onto the curb but didn't look back. Mason watched her disappear through the folding doors, the card still pressed to her side like it was heavier than it looked. They drove in silence that morning. The sky above Cleveland was overcast, clouds stitched low like a blanket holding the city still. As they left the busy streets and climbed toward Langley Hill, the buildings gave way to stretches of fading fall foliage. The road narrowed. Wind rustled dry leaves along the pavement. Lily kept her backpack on her lap the whole time, hands clasped tightly over the zipper. Mason turned into a gravel driveway, the tires crunching slow and careful. At the end sat a wooden cabin with tall windows and a porch that wrapped halfway around. It wasn't large or extravagant, just old enough to carry the weight of years. The trees stood close maples and birch, and their red and gold crowns hovered over the roof like witnesses. Lily stepped out first, cautious but unafraid. Her eyes scanned the front door, the porch swing swaying slightly in the breeze. "This place looks like a storybook," she said. "It used to be," Mason replied, unlocking the door. "Come in. No need to take off your shoes." The air inside smelled of cedar and paper. The living room was sparse bookshelves, a worn couch, and on one wall, a large framed canvas. Lily walked toward it without waiting for permission. It was a forest scene, painted in soft blues and silvers. Moonlight dripped through trees, and little white orbs floated through the underbrush fireflies, or stars, or something in between. Toward the lower left, nearly hidden, was an owl perched on a crooked branch, its eyes slightly uneven. Lily stared at it. Her hand rose, almost of its own accord, and landed gently on the glass. "I drew this once," she said quietly. "Not the whole thing. Just the owl, the eyes. I remember trying to fix the left one and giving up." Mason didn't speak. He just watched her. She turned. "Why is it here?" Alara drew the sketch when she was 5. Julia turned it into a painting. They hung it here before we ever unpacked the boxes. Lily looked down, lips pressed tight. She walked slowly across the room and up the stairs without asking, her fingers trailing along the railing. Mason followed, but gave her space. She stopped outside a small door. "That one," he said. That was hers. She opened it. The room was simple. Pale yellow walls. A small bed with a faded comforter still tucked neatly. A low bookshelf lined with children's stories and puzzles. And in the corner, a toy keyboard, the kind with only half the keys still working. Lily walked in like she'd sleepwalked into a memory. She knelt next to the bookshelf and pulled out a photo album. The front was cracked, the spine barely held. She flipped it open. On the first page was a snapshot of Lara in a blue dress, arms outstretched toward the camera. Julia crouched beside her, laughing. Lily's fingers touched the edge of the page. then turned it. On the second page was a note, written in looping script, a single line of verse in blue ink. Without hesitating, Lily whispered it aloud. Word for word, Mason didn't move. She blinked. I don't know why I know that. It was a poem Julia wrote, for Alara. She read it every night before bed. Lily sat back, as if her own body startled her. Downstairs. Mason's phone buzzed. He stepped away to answer. Ellen, he said. Her voice came through sharp, clipped. I found Richard Cole's last listed address. He's not in the city anymore. Mason, he moved to a private medical facility outside Columbus 6 months ago. Medical, he's recovering from something. I'm still pulling files. But, Mason, there's more. A nurse who used to work with him said he requested sealed storage of an item labeled child welfare records. Unauthorized. Mason exhaled, tight and slow. Do you want to see him? Ellen asked. I think I have to. He looked back up the stairs. Lily hadn't moved. She was still holding the album like it might shift the weight of her whole life. The road to Akron stretched like a memory Mason didn't want to revisit. Each mile took him deeper into a past he had long buried under work. Silence, and long nights alone in his penthouse. But today, there was no looking away. The name Richard Cole sat heavy in his mind, not as a friend anymore, but as a fracture line he had never seen until now. The house was easy to miss, tucked between two overgrown yards and half hidden by a leaning oak. It looked tired, paint chipped, windows dull behind dusty blinds. A tin sign rattled in the wind. Private property, no trespassing. Mason parked across the street, engine off. He didn't reach for the door, just sat there, hands still on the wheel, remembering the moment he'd handed over everything to Richard. Back then, he had been unable to speak at Julia's service. He hadn't even held the urn. Richard had taken care of the papers, the arrangements, the unspoken, or so he thought. A door creaked somewhere nearby. A woman walking a dachshund glanced over and slowed down. Her brows pinched slightly as she studied his car, then, perhaps recognizing his face from some old news article. She tilted her head. You here for Mr. Cole? She asked, voice tinged with suspicion but not unkind. Mason rolled down his window halfway. I used to know him. We haven't talked in years. She nodded. You're the second visitor in 2 days. That made him sit straighter. Yesterday afternoon, she continued. Little girl, brown hair, small, polite. Said she was looking for a man who used to work at a hospital. She called him the person who helped take her away from her first house. Strange way to say it. Mason's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Did she go inside? No, the woman said. He didn't answer. House has been quiet for weeks. Some nurse comes by with meds and groceries, but the man himself, haven't seen him out in days. He nodded, murmured a thank you, and she moved on. His phone was already out when he leaned back in his seat. The first call went to Ellen. I need you to check something, he said. Guardianship transfer, right after Julia's accident. Look for the name Richard Cole. Any links to foster placement, custody hold, anything. Give me 10 minutes, she replied. He waited, staring at the house. It didn't move, didn't blink. When the email came through, it was short and surgical. The file opened with a legal header, Emergency Child Protective Transfer. Below, a single line leapt off the page. Temporary guardian, Richard A. Cole. Relation to child family acquaintance. Authorized by surviving parent. Except Mason never signed that, never authorized anyone. He scrolled further. There was no secondary witness signature, no follow-up transfer. The record simply stopped. He didn't realize he had cursed out loud until a car behind him honked. He shifted the gear to reverse, but didn't drive off. Not yet. He stared at the front steps. They looked smaller now, as if the whole house had shrunk under the weight of what it had hidden. His phone vibrated again. A text, unknown number. He opened it. The message read, Stop digging. Mason. This isn't just about you anymore. Keep going, and you might lose more than a child this time." He didn't answer it, didn't even save the number. He just locked the phone and stared ahead, jaw set tight. From the corner of his eye, a curtain in the upper window shifted slightly, but when he turned, it was still again like nothing had moved at all. The morning air outside Greenfield Shelter was brisk, the kind that scraped gently across the skin like fine sandpaper. Mason stood at the entrance for a long minute before walking in, hands buried deep in his coat pockets. The lobby hadn't changed much, same worn tile floors, same flickering fluorescent light above the reception desk. A young woman in her 20s sat behind the counter, tapping lightly at a keyboard. She glanced up and offered a cautious smile. "I'm looking for records," Mason said, his voice low but steady. "Children who were here in late 2016 to early 2017. The receptionist's smile faded a little. "Are you a social worker?" "No," he said, pulling out a document from the inside of his coat. "But I'm listed as the legal next of kin for Julia Bennett. She volunteered here. Her daughter Alara was registered after the accident." Her fingers paused above the keyboard. She looked at the document, then at him again, and after a moment's hesitation, nodded. "Give me a second." 10 minutes later, he was seated in a small, windowless office, filled with old filing cabinets and the scent of dust and laminate. The shelter director, a soft-spoken woman named Nadine, brought over a thick binder. She slid it across the table toward him, already open to a tab marked Bennett. He turned the pages slowly. Alara Bennett. Date of birth, October 19th, 2011. Entered shelter, February 2016. Departure, March 2017. Placement, private guardian transfer, Brightwell Placement Group. Mason frowned. Brightwell. Nadine nodded. It was a private agency. Not many of those passed through here. The contact information seemed valid at the time. Papers looked official. "Do you still have them?" She reached into a drawer and retrieved a manila folder. Inside were copies transfer authorization, a signed declaration of supervision, and a routing of monthly care checks. The address listed for Brightwell was in Manhattan, but Mason had already searched it last night. The building was empty. No sign, no receptionist. The company had dissolved in 2019. Public records showed it had no financial activity, no taxes paid, and the name tied to its founding, Richard Cole. He stared at the signature. It wasn't forged. It was real. Real ink. Real intent. Richard had set up a shell, moved Alara under the radar, and erased every trail behind her. His mouth was dry. "Has anyone else asked about her?" he asked quietly. Nadine shook her head. "Not until recently." He leaned back in his chair. The room felt too small now, too close. But something on the wall caught his eye. It was a children's drawing crudely sketched in crayon, half faded with time. A little girl stood in the rain, her shoes untied, her umbrella broken. Behind her, a window glowed with light. Someone waiting at the sill. The drawing was pinned with a thumbtack above the light switch, almost forgotten. Mason stood up slowly. "That drawing, who made it?" Nadine stepped beside him. "That one's been here for years. We used to rotate them out. That one stayed. It's always been different." He didn't answer. He already knew. Alara had drawn it the day he missed a school recital. It was raining, and she had waited by the gym door for nearly an hour. Julia had taken a photo of her afterward. Mason remembered the look on her face. He reached for the thumbtack but stopped. It didn't belong to him anymore. Just then, a soft knock. A staff volunteer entered, holding a small plastic box with cracked corners. "This was found in a storage locker when we cleaned out old drawers. No tag, but there's a letter inside." She handed the box over gently. Mason took it with both hands. Inside were a few faded items, a pressed flower, a keychain with a cartoon astronaut, and a folded envelope, worn soft at the edges, written across the front, in small, looping letters. "To Dad." His fingers trembled as he unfolded it. The handwriting inside was unmistakably a child's, careful, unpracticed, but familiar. Every letter curved the way Alara used to write when she was learning phonics. The letter didn't ask for rescue. It didn't accuse. It only said she missed the color green, the smell of rain, and that some nights she still dreamed of lullabies. Mason stood in silence, the paper resting in his hand like something living. The inside of the car was still. Mason sat in the driver's seat, one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting on the worn plastic lid of the box. He opened it slowly, the hinges letting out a soft creak like something exhaled. Inside, the contents were meager, a bundle of folded paper, 3 pieces in total. The first was written in pencil, faint and unsteady. Some letters were backward, the spacing uneven. Dad, did you come looking for me? I'm being good. I remember Mom's green chair. I miss it. He swallowed hard. The handwriting was unmistakably a child's no polish, but honest. He touched the edge of the page with a thumb, not fully realizing he'd held his breath until his chest began to ache. The second note, inked in blue marker, came with darker weight. They say I shouldn't remember. Remembering makes grown-ups sad, but I don't know how not to. Mason blinked slowly, eyes burning. He could see her, alone in a room somewhere, coached to forget, told that love and memory were burdens. It made him feel something he hadn't let surface in years. Not anger, not grief, just helplessness, wearing a new name. The third letter was on yellow construction paper, torn at one corner. Most of the message was scrawled in crayon. The edges had dark smudges, like fingers had gripped it too hard. I don't know who I am, but when I sing, I don't feel scared. He read it twice. The last sentence struck deeper than the rest. Beneath those words was a small hand-drawn map. Not precise, but full of symbols, trees, a crooked fence, a long trail beside a body of water. At the top corner, a red X near what looked like a cabin. Beneath it, in smaller writing, the place I was told not to tell anyone about. Mason stared at the page. Time bent around him in that moment. Every second since Julia's death, since the day the casket lowered without his daughter's name carved on it, folded into one. He wasn't breathing now. Just sitting there, holding paper that carried the voice of someone he once cradled to sleep. The silence inside the car was broken only by the distant sound of traffic, muffled by the windows. He picked up his phone, dialed. Ellen answered on the third ring. I need you to contact someone at the bureau, Mason said, voice flat but deliberate. Someone in missing persons, or civil exploitation, or both. Ellen didn't respond immediately. You found something. Yes, but it's not just about Alara anymore. His fingers gripped the steering wheel. It's a pattern. Someone's been helping children disappear off the books, off the system, and they used my grief to do it. Ellen exhaled into the phone. You're sure there's a map, drawn by a child? It leads to somewhere no one was supposed to find. He glanced back at the yellow paper, still on his lap. And I'm going there. Mason. Wait. No, he said. Not sharply, but with the finality of someone who had waited long enough. I've followed lawyers. I've followed ghosts. This time, I follow her. He hung up before she could reply. The lake on the map wasn't labeled, but the shape it resembled a body of water just north of Canton, Ohio. He knew it from old hiking trips with Julia. He once joked they'd build a summer cabin there. Now, it seemed someone else had. He drove for nearly an hour, not speaking, not thinking. The box sat beside him on the passenger seat. He wouldn't leave it behind. He wouldn't leave her behind again. Every turn on the road felt like peeling back another layer of silence, the kind that had settled too long, that had buried too much. He reached a fork on the dirt road, the one from the drawing. To the right, trees thickened. To the left, the lake emerged in the distance still, gray, bordered by wild reeds. He stopped the car, took the map, got out. Wind brushed against him, cold and dry. He followed the path on foot, boots crunching over fallen leaves. After 10 minutes, the cabin came into view, small, wooden, faded red paint peeling from the doorframe. There was no sign of life, but a faint ribbon fluttered in the breeze tied to a branch near the porch. It was green, faded and frayed, but unmistakably green. The courthouse on Lakeside Avenue stood in its usual hush, but inside courtroom 4C, there was a quiet tension that hadn't eased since morning. Mason sat beside Ellen at the plaintiff's table, hands folded, his expression unreadable. His suit was pressed, his posture composed, but nothing about him felt still. At the other side, Lily sat flanked by two temporary guardians. She wore a navy cardigan, her hair pulled back in a simple braid. Her eyes didn't meet Mason's. Her hands were folded in her lap, holding something small, maybe the edge of a handkerchief, maybe just her own thumb. Ellen leaned slightly toward Mason. "Let me take the first half. You'll know when to speak." He nodded once. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with graying curls and a low voice, opened the file before her. "Ms. Moore, you may proceed." Ellen stood. Her voice carried gently across the room, but each word landed with purpose. This case is not about a contested guardianship in the usual sense. It is about restoring identity. A child was displaced after a tragedy. Official systems failed. Today, we present evidence not of potential custody, but of truth, who this child is, and who she was before someone erased her. She motioned toward the clerk, who entered into evidence several items: a music sheet marked Evening Lullaby, the old drawing of the owl under moonlight, school enrollment forms signed by someone using a Brightwell placement group alias. "Brightwell," Ellen said, holding up the paper, "never had a physical office. The name was registered to a shell corporation in Albany, New York, payments routed through 4 intermediaries. The signature here, approving removal from Greenfield Shelter, is that of Richard Cole, who, until recently, was assumed to have handled only post-accident logistics." The judge's eyes didn't lift. She continued flipping pages, silent. A child psychologist took the stand next. She described her sessions with Lily, how the girl didn't react to most memories, didn't respond to her foster name, but visibly flinched at sounds matching Evening Lullaby. She didn't remember why she knew it, the doctor said, but she hummed the melody perfectly. It was not learned. It was recalled. Then came Emily. The retired shelter worker walked slowly to the stand, her steps heavy, as if each one peeled off a weight she'd carried too long. "I'm not proud of staying silent," she said. "Back then, we were told it was confidential, that some kids needed a clean break. I didn't ask. I should have. But I remember this child." She pointed toward Lily. "She called me Miss Emily the Secret Keeper, and once, during storm drills, she hid under a desk and whispered, 'Mommy used to count lightning with me.'" The court grew still. No one looked at Lily. Mason watched her shoulders tense, but she didn't speak. Ellen closed the argument. "We are not asking the court to restore full custody today. We ask the court to acknowledge that Lily, whose name is now on state records as Lily G., is in fact Alara Bennett. That this is not hearsay, but a convergence of memory, paper trail, and testimony, and that she deserves to know who she is." The judge nodded once, then closed the file. "This court will recess for 24 hours before issuing an interim decision." The bailiff made the call for adjournment. People rose, papers shuffled, a few reporters murmured outside in the hallway. But inside, Mason remained seated. Lily stood slowly. The guardians at her side prepared to guide her away, but she paused, then stepped forward. She didn't look up right away. Only when she stood next to Mason's chair did she tilt her chin toward him, voice barely a whisper. "I'm not sure I believe everything yet," she said, eyes tracing his face like she wasn't sure where to land. "But if I really am Alara, would you still stay?" Mason looked at her. He didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. It was barely past 8 when the knock came. Mason had just finished drying a dish, still in the flannel shirt he wore around the house. He opened the door, expecting a neighbor, or maybe the mailman who always ran early on Thursdays. Instead, he found Lily standing beside a caseworker from the state. The air between them was cool and quiet. "She asked to come," the woman said, keeping her tone neutral. "Under supervision, for now." The judge wants to observe the emotional connection before making any further rulings. Mason stepped aside. No need for words. The door creaked as it closed behind them. Lily didn't sit. She moved slowly through the apartment, like someone walking into an old song they barely remembered. Her eyes scanned the bookcase, the framed paintings Julia had hung years ago, the chipped mug still on the counter. She stopped when she saw the shelf near the window. There, half buried in a layer of dust, was a small photo frame. Inside, Julia and Alara were frozen in time one Sunday morning at the bakery, powdered sugar on Alara's cheek, her face beaming. Lily reached up and took the frame in both hands. "This is me," she said, not as a question. Mason stayed still. She looked back at him, eyes narrow, almost asking him to deny it. He didn't. He just nodded. She held the photo tighter. Her fingers touched the glass like she wasn't sure it would stay if she let go. Then, carefully, as if testing her own breath. Lily stepped forward. She looked at Mason for a long time. Then one word came out, not like a title, not like a memory, but like something between dream and instinct. Dad. The room stopped moving. She blinked, almost startled by her own voice, but she didn't take it back. Her shoulders didn't retreat, and Mason, though his chest rose with a sharp inhale, didn't rush toward her. He lowered himself onto the edge of the couch. His eyes were misty, but his voice was calm. "If you're not sure yet," he said gently, "we don't have to remember everything right away. We can just start again. From here. From tomorrow." Lily didn't answer. She didn't need to. She looked down. Somewhere along the moment, her hand had found his. It wasn't clinging, wasn't grasping out of fear, just holding. Steady, like the way a tree finds light after a long winter. They ate dinner at the small table near the kitchen, grilled cheese sandwiches Mason made slowly, careful not to burn the corners. Lily ate without speaking much, but her plate was clean when she finished. The apartment was quiet after, not heavy, not uncertain, just a kind of quiet neither of them had known how much they needed. Then, just before Mason could clear the plates, a small sound, barely a scrape, came from the door. He walked over and found an envelope pushed under the bottom edge. No return address, no footsteps outside. He opened it. Inside, a single USB drive, and a folded note written in tight, sharp lettering. "You think it's over, it's not. There are more like her, and not all of them make it home." The courtroom felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the rain outside Cleveland. Maybe the way people sat straighter, eyes sharper, no longer just curious observers, but witnesses to something unraveling. Room 7 of the Cuyahoga County Superior Court held more than files and benches. That day it held a question hanging like breath. In winter, could a system forget a child? Mason sat at the front with Ellen. Lily was nearby, flanked by her court-appointed guardians. She didn't look nervous. She looked like someone who had run too far to turn back. The buzz outside had begun hours earlier. A couple of reporters lingered by the metal detector. One headline that morning had read, "Missing Girl." Found another asked flatly, "The Bennett child, stolen or lost inside?" The judge, an older man with deep creases near his eyes, called the session to order. The lawyers opened their folders. The fluorescent lights hummed. The state's representative was first. She moved briskly, with the detachment of someone who'd been handed a file late and had questions she didn't want to ask out loud. "We received new material this morning," she said, holding up a slim USB drive sealed in evidence plastic. Delivered anonymously, but verified. The screen lit up behind her. Lines of contracts, dates, wire transfers. "This is a financial agreement," she continued, "signed between Richard Cole and an entity listed as Langwell Human Studies. Under it, minors deemed emotionally unanchored were to be reassigned under a pilot social welfare restructuring program." She paused. "In less abstract terms, it authorized the erasure of their identities, placement into institutions or homes with no traceable connection, under the claim of humane intervention." The room went still. Mason didn't move. He had seen the contract already, Last night on his laptop in a dark kitchen, but seeing it now, under court lighting, with Lily in the room, it hit differently. It wasn't just about Alara anymore. It was about names turned into numbers, about children reduced to policy footnotes. When his turn came to speak, Mason stood slowly. The judge looked at him, expression unreadable. "Mr. Bennett, would you like to comment?" He nodded. "I'm not here to restore anything," Mason said quietly. "Not a legacy, not a bloodline. I'm not asking the court to hand me a daughter." He glanced at Lily, who was now watching him carefully. "I'm here because a child deserves to choose where she belongs. For once, not based on papers, not on what adults think is best, but on where her hand reaches when no one's telling her where it should go." His words landed softer than the courtroom expected. No rhetoric, no appeal to emotion, just steady ground. The judge said nothing. He tapped his gavel once, a signal for recess. But then, the state's attorney spoke again. "We request an emergency subpoena for Richard Cole. In light of this material, his testimony is now central." The judge paused, then nodded. "Granted. Reconvene in 72 hours. As the room began to thin, Mason turned to gather his coat. A quiet voice near the aisle stopped him. "I remember her," the woman said. She was in her 60s, soft hair tied back, eyes clear like someone who had been holding something in too long. "I was at Greenfield, night shift. I gave that girl extra applesauce when no one was looking. I called her sweetheart even when they told us not to use names." She hesitated. "If you need someone to say it out loud, I'm ready." Mason looked at her, not with urgency, not with relief. Just a quiet nod, like a door, long jammed, had finally started to move. The rain hadn't let up that morning. It streaked the courthouse windows in thin, steady lines, as if trying to scrub away what was about to unfold inside. The news vans were parked 3 rows deep on the curb, their antennas raised like antennas of something waiting to record not just words, but reckonings. Inside room 7, there was no chatter, no whispers, just breath held between verdicts. The door to the witness stand opened. 2 officers escorted in Richard Cole. He looked smaller than anyone remembered. The dark suits, the sharpness gone. He moved slow, as if every step acknowledged the weight of years not spoken for. His hands trembled slightly as he was sworn in. He didn't raise his head to look at Mason, or Lily. The prosecutor began with a simple question. "Mr. Cole, were you involved in the reassignment of Alara Bennett's identity?" Richard hesitated. Then his lawyer placed a small screen on the table. On it played the video from the USB drive. Grainy, time-stamped, but clear enough Richard's voice, unmistakable, in an old interview. "They asked me to pick a few." His recorded self said, "The quiet ones less likely to be found. I didn't do it for the money. I did it because, sometimes, forgetting is safer than remembering." Richard looked up, eyes dull. "Yes," he said, softly. "I did it." He didn't ask for mercy, didn't offer apology. Just a line drawn down the middle of the courtroom, splitting the man he used to be from the man now known. Then came the unraveling. He spoke of a program out of Chicago Langwell Human Studies, a name now tied to a dozen minor scandals. "They gave me lists. They said these kids would be lost anyway, so we made sure they were placed far from any trace new names, new states, sometimes new birthdays." He paused. Ilara's file came marked priority. Her mother had died. Her father wasn't stable. That's what I was told. I thought I was doing her a favor. Across the aisle, Mason sat stone still. He could have shouted, could have listed every night he walked the streets in search of a shadow, but he didn't move. He only watched his daughter. Because now, Lily was standing. She approached slowly, with a glance toward the judge, who gave her a nod. Ellen stayed close behind, but didn't touch her. This wasn't a moment for adults to lead. Lily faced Richard. For a while, she said nothing. Then, her voice came not loud, but steady. "You told me my name didn't matter," she said. "That remembering made things worse. You said if I kept quiet, things would be easier. She took a breath. But you never took my song. There wasn't a rustle in the courtroom. Lily closed her eyes. Then, from somewhere buried deeper than memory, came the first line of a lullaby. The room held its breath as she sang it soft. Evening comes and shadows grow, but stars know where I sleep. It wasn't polished. Her voice cracked, but no one moved. Mason's eyes closed for a moment, and when he opened them, they were wet. The judge cleared his throat. Miss Bennett, thank you. He turned to the clerk. A beat passed, then the gavel. Based on verified testimony, sealed records, and the child's current psychological evaluation, this court recognizes Alara Bennett as the lawful daughter of Mr. Mason Whitmore. Full guardianship is restored, effective immediately. No one clapped. There was no cheering, just a long pause, and a father who rose, slowly, so as not to wake a miracle. The sky over Cleveland that morning was clear, unusually so for late October. A breeze drifted through the trees lining the block of the Rivera Community Arts Center, where the glass doors had been propped open. Inside, the walls were covered with color crayon, chalk, watercolor, bits of torn paper. Dozens of small hands had signed their names in the corners of drawings. Some showed houses with open doors. Some held stick figures under stars. But the largest piece, placed in the center, was a reprint of Alara's old painting, The Girl Under Rain, now framed in wood. Mason had sanded himself. No speeches, no ribbon cutting. That was deliberate. Mason and Alara arrived without fanfare. She wore a sweater that hung slightly over her hands, and he carried a box of art supplies. They moved through the space like people who belonged, but didn't need to be seen. When a little girl dropped her brush, Alara crouched beside her. When one boy asked how to mix sky blue, Mason opened the box and helped him blend with his fingertips. The coordinator passed by, offered them warm cider, and said quietly, "You could have made this about the court win." Mason only shook his head. "This was never about winning," he said. In the far corner, a group of volunteers helped tape drawings along a stretch of wall. A curly-haired boy whispered to a woman beside him, "Is Mr. Mason her real dad?" She smiled, not because of a judge, because he stayed. Later, when most of the children were occupied and the room had quieted into soft conversation, Alara pulled something from her backpack, a small box wrapped in paper faded along the creases. She handed it to Mason without a word. He unwrapped it slowly. Inside was the necklace she'd worn the day she first came to his apartment. The pendant had changed. Now, it bore 3 engraved words. The metal dulled just enough to feel familiar. "I choose you." Mason looked at her, speechless. "I didn't always know who I was," she said, her voice calm, "but I always knew who made me feel safe." He held the necklace in his palm. Then carefully, with hands that had once trembled signing documents he hadn't understood, he reached forward and placed it back around her neck. She didn't flinch. No one applauded. No one needed to. That evening, back at the apartment, Mason opened his laptop one last time. The decrypted folder from the USB had finished running. The names filled the screen in a long, steady list: 23 children, different states, different birth dates, most with files that stopped in 2017. Some had already been found, reunited. Others had no photos, no records after a certain point, just silence. He turned the screen toward Alara. Her eyes scanned the list, quiet and sharp. "We can help," she said. He nodded. They didn't plan anything that night, didn't map it out. He made tea. She sketched in her notebook. Outside, the wind shifted. Inside, the light stayed warm. She didn't look back. But he knew. Something had begun again. The necklace still sat by the windowsill, catching light each morning like it was remembering something. Not everything lost finds its way back with clarity, but some things return quietly, with hands that don't let go this time. No promises, no rewrites, just presence. Maybe that's what choosing someone really means, not fixing the past, but standing still when the world says move on. And in that stillness, sometimes, love starts again.